In the 1970s, American scientists documented an aquatic plant described as nature's swamp supermarket. They calculated that it could produce more than 10 to 20 tons of starch per hectare from its underground roots, equal to or higher than corn in wetlands, while simultaneously removing nitrogen and phosphorus from polluted water. Every part of it is edible: stems, leaves, roots, young shoots, pollen, 6 food types from a single organism with starch superior to potatoes. It filters dirty water on its own, turning wetlands into a free food garden with no chemical inputs required. But more than 50 years later, you only know it as a weed that must be eradicated, growing densely in rivers and lakes and then being cut down or sprayed with herbicides. This is cattail, a reed plant drained from human history, because it threatens the industrial agriculture model that depends on fertilizers, pesticides, and monoculture. Welcome to the Forgotten Flora Vault. Before we open this vault, understand clearly the knowledge you are about to hear may change how you see wetlands and wild rivers and lakes, places where cattail still grows freely, waiting to be used as a real food source. Let us rewind time to see how the story really began. In the 1970s, when the world was searching for solutions to malnutrition and sustainable food systems, cattail, type of species, began to receive serious scientific attention. A key paper published in the journal Economic Botany in 1975 asked a direct question: cattail's weed problem or potential crop. It described cattail as a potential plant with starch-rich rhizomes. Other studies from the USDA and European researchers confirmed that cattail could address protein and starch shortages in poor regions where wet soils make conventional crops difficult to grow. Indigenous peoples of North America had used it for centuries as a staple food source. Boiled or ground rhizomes, young shoots eaten raw, pollen used as flour, and the same was true in Asia and Europe. But then something strange happened. After the initial promising evaluations, deeper research stopped. Funding for large-scale trials dried up. No major agricultural programs pushed cattail as a crop. Instead, it was gradually placed on lists of noxious weeds or invasive plants in many U.S. states, especially hybrid or non-native species, targeted for eradication to protect ecosystems or allow land development. At the same time, the U.S. agricultural industry was draining hundreds of thousands of acres of wetlands each year, in total losing more than half of original wetland areas during the 20th century, mainly to convert them into corn and soybean monocultures. Every growing season, you pay for chemical fertilizers, newly purchased seeds, and large irrigation systems on fields that are becoming increasingly degraded. Meanwhile, cattail, it needs nothing. It spreads on its own, cleans the environment on its own, and provides food on its own without a single bag of fertilizer. And now, as global food prices continue to rise, supply chains remain fragile under climate and geopolitical pressure. Cattail still grows everywhere, from vast North America, Europe, to Asia. You see it in marshes along lake shores, canals, riverbanks, wet places that humans usually avoid or try to reclaim. But it is not in supermarkets. It does not appear in modern cookbooks. It is not mentioned in any official agricultural programs. So why has a plant that produces free, abundant food been erased from public awareness? This silence is not accidental. This is the cost of dependency, and it is being paid from your own pocket every day whenever food prices spike with each crisis. Now let me show you exactly what has been buried. Cattail, not just a weed growing in marshes. It is a multifunctional food source with 6 edible parts from a single plant, each nutrient-dense and capable of replacing an entire portion of vegetables or grains in a dependent food system. Let us start from the ground up. Beneath the mud, the elongated, swollen rhizomes of cattail are the real treasure. They contain 30 to 46% starch, can be ground into flour, cooked like tubers, or processed to extract starch for staple foods, in the same way humans have done with potatoes and cassava. Protein content ranges from 6 to 8%, 3 times higher than common potatoes, only about 2 to 3% protein. Compared with corn or rice, cattail rhizomes provide comparable starch, but are superior in calcium, several times higher than rice or potatoes. You can boil, roast, or mash them like potatoes, but with higher nutritional value. This makes them a sustainable energy source ideal for deficient diets in poor regions. Above the waterline early in the growing season, cattail pushes up white tender young shoots. These are eaten when young, crisp, mild in flavor, similar to asparagus, rich in vitamin C, and can be eaten raw in salads or cooked. Research from PMC shows that young shoots contain crude protein around 8.7 to 8.8%, much higher than common spinach, around 2.9%, and they provide ether extract at 3.5%, contributing healthy fats. Compared with commercial asparagus, cattail shoots have advantages in drought tolerance and natural growth without the need for fertilizers. When the plant enters the flowering stage, another phenomenon occurs. The male flower releases a fine yellow pollen that can be collected dried and used as flour. With 20 to 25% protein, according to nutritional reports from NIH and PMC, it surpasses common wheat flour, around 10 to 13% protein, and can be used for pancakes or as a substitute for expensive protein powders. Compared with bee pollen or other plant protein sources, cattail pollen is cheaper and easier to harvest, with the added benefit of higher mineral content such as calcium and iron. You only need to collect and dry it to obtain a natural nutrient-rich flour. Leaves and stems are also important. Leaves can be cooked as green vegetables, aiding digestion, and are rich in minerals such as potassium and magnesium, higher than spinach or kale in some aspects. The stem has an edible core like cucumber crisp and water-rich with vitamin A and C, comparable to common vegetables. Then there are the seeds, the final part. Small, abundant, and often overlooked. But biologically, cattail seeds are the final result of the plant's entire energy accumulation cycle. When roasted or ground, they function as a coarse grain, providing carbohydrates and energy in a way very similar to traditional cereals. But the value of cattail does not stop at nutrition. Cattail does not only feed you, it also heals the surrounding environment. It absorbs nitrogen and phosphorus from wastewater, up to 33 kilograms of phosphorus per hectare, according to IISD, turning polluted rivers and lakes into clean food sources. Compared with other water filtering plants such as reed phragmites, cattail is more effective in highly polluted areas with better carbon storage and nutrient retention capacity. Total yield 15 to 30 tons of dry matter per hectare, higher than average corn, 10 to 15 tons per hectare on wetlands and rhizomes alone, already provide 10 to 20 tons of starch. One plant replaces an entire garden greens from leaves, protein from pollen, starch from roots, all without buying anything from industry. And this is not a modern price crisis story. This is historical evidence of real food security, a survival resource that has sustained humans for millennia. For indigenous peoples of North America, they dug up rhizomes in the fall, stored them through the winter, a reliable starch source when snow covered the fields. Yellow pollen was carefully collected, mixed with other flours to bake pancakes or make sweet mush. From the Iroquois to the Paiute, cattail was not just emergency food, but a year-round staple. Further back in time in Roman Europe, and earlier, cattail was recorded as a freshwater food. Wetlands were not considered dead land. They were seen as places that provided food when crops failed. Even during World War II, the U.S. military planned large-scale harvesting of cattail to produce starch flour, an alternative food source when supply chains were disrupted, and seed fluff was used to stuff life jackets. The plans only stopped because the war ended. When U.S. agriculture shifted to large-scale industrialization, cattail was suddenly labeled a weed, a plant to be eradicated. First, cattail cannot be mechanized. Wetlands are not flat fields where harvesters can run in straight lines. Cattail grows densely, unevenly with mixed heights. Rhizomes tangled beneath the mud. Modern machinery requires straight rows, uniformity, and easy control. Cattail refuses to follow those rules. Second, it cannot be controlled. Cattail spreads through rhizomes, an underground root system that expands without seeding, without the need to buy new seed each year. Just one remaining piece of root, and it comes back. Farmers do not need to buy fertilizer or pesticides. It breaks the dependency loop that the agrochemical industry relies on to survive. And third, most importantly, cattail cannot be stored long-term in industrial systems. Rhizomes spoil easily if not processed quickly. Pollen, and young shoots are only fresh for a short season. It does not transport well over long distances, does not package neatly for supermarket shelves, does not create an expensive superfood brand. There is no profit from logistics, packaging, or marketing. It exists only locally for local communities, not as a global commodity to export and generate billions. This is the exact reason it disappeared from mainstream agriculture. There was no ban, but recommendations and incentives for eradication. Recent studies confirm cattail expansion is largely driven by human-altered hydrology and increased nutrients. The corn/soy monoculture system itself creates the conditions for cattail to invade, then blames it to justify draining wetlands and prioritizing high-input crops. When you already know that cattail is not a weed, but a hidden aquatic superfood, turn knowledge into action. Now, the important thing is how to recognize it and how to use it safely. You can start with wild harvesting in clean areas. Cattail, it grows in clumps 1 to 3 meters tall with long, narrow leaves standing upright like blades. The characteristic cylindrical flower spike looks like a sausage attached to the stem, the male part on top with yellow pollen, the female part below, turning brown when mature. You will find it in marshes along lake edges, canals, and calm riverbanks. In terms of safety, cattail is not poisonous, but like all wild foods, the right part at the right time matters. Only harvest from clean locations. Young shoots can be eaten raw or cooked while still tender. In summer, hold the flower and shake it into a paper bag to collect pollen. The swollen root part under the mud, dig up the rhizome, wash off the mud boil for 20 to 30 minutes, or roast or process into flour. Do not eat large amounts raw, because raw starch is hard to digest and can cause intestinal discomfort. Pollen should only be collected from yellow male flowers dried safely. Seeds are roasted like popcorn. If you want to grow cattail, the truth is, you do not need to plant it in the traditional sense. In many places, cattail already grows naturally. Just one living rhizome segment placed in moist soil or along a pond edge will grow on its own. If there is no natural source, you can look for rhizomes or seeds from aquatic plant suppliers. Not large agricultural stores, but small sources specializing in wetland plants. Cattail does not need fertilizer, no irrigation, no weekly care. The only thing it needs is water and space. You do not need to change your entire diet. Just try a small part of one meal from young shoots of salad, pull the tender white shoots, wash, clean slice, thinly mix with olive oil, lemon salt, crisp and fresh like a premium cucumber salad. Or mix 1 part pollen with 3 parts wheat flour. Add eggs/milk. Bake golden pancakes, nutty and protein-rich. Try it once. When you prepare and eat it, you are reclaiming a piece of freedom that the system tried to bury. Imagine a not-so-distant future. Prolonged drought cracks fields dry, extreme floods, submerge already depleted farmland soil, loses structure after decades of dependence on chemical fertilizers. And when fertilizer prices surge with energy, food production costs rise accordingly, not doubled but multiplied many times. In all these scenarios, most modern crops fail in the same way. They require stable water, fertile soil, and expensive chemical inputs. Cattail does not. It is one of the very few plants that can tolerate two opposing extremes. In drought, it survives in remaining wet areas, rapidly colonizes when conditions are dry, but soils still retain moisture, without artificial irrigation. When soils degrade, it absorbs excess nitrogen and phosphorus from wastewater, naturally improving soil conditions. During floods, it stabilizes riverbanks, holds soil, and continues accumulating starch beneath the mud. But one thing must be stated clearly here. I do not encourage destroying wetlands, reckless harvesting, or harming ecosystems. Wetlands are complex living systems, and cattail is part of them, not something to exploit. But understanding it changes how we view food. Food does not always come from industrial fields. It can come from marshes, wild rivers, and lakes, places considered useless, but in fact are nature's food security reserves. Every cattail you identify, you try to process or you allow to grow freely in a corner of your wetland is a small act of rebellion against dependency. It proves that food does not need to be complex, does not need patents, does not need corporations, only nature and a bit of knowledge. Reports from the 1970s still exist. Studies on crop potential are still there. If this video makes you look differently at a familiar riverbank or marsh press, like if you know someone worried about food prices, water pollution, or the future of agriculture, share it with them. And if you want to keep opening vaults, the system tried to forget subscribe and turn on the bell. A plant that self-regenerates every year does not need replanting, called a noxious weed by many states because it threatens the annual seed model. We are dismantling the dependency supply chain, one plant, one seed, one meal at a time. Thank you for being here.